stuff before I start proper, just to configure a few things out. Figure a few things out and configure some stuff. Yeah, that's the one, mainly if this is actually working, so, yeah. Also, if the mic is just picking up in left and right, or right and left. So, yeah, as the jaunty little graphic says, we're just testing some stuff at the minute. So, audio test and channel tests. We're doing it through Restream. I just need to check that it is actually picking up on the places it says it's supposed to be. So yeah, don't get too excited, but hopefully it is all working. And what have you. So it does actually seem like it's working pretty good. I can actually seem to monitor all of the separate stream audience, like it's giving me like a status of it. I can see there are 2 people on Facebook, which is pretty cool. There's 1 person watching via YouTube. Periscope is online, but is Periscope even a thing? That's, I don't know, but I added it there just in case, and it is going through Twitch as well. So yeah, at the minute we are just testing a few things, and if you are watching and you want to do me a favour, could you let me know if you are wearing headphones? I'm going to check this myself in a minute, but if you are watching and you are watching through headphones, could you let me know if I'm coming through left and right? I have a funny feeling from the preliminary tests I did offline that it's coming through just 1 channel for whatever reason, and I don't really have too much time to figure out what's causing that at the minute, but I do have a backup, so that is primarily my main testing concern at the moment. So hold your horses. I am going to be starting properly in about 10 minutes, so kind of gives you a bit of time to go make yourself a brew, go get yourself a blanket, I don't know, if you want to get cozy with a blanket. It is blanket weather, so you could very well be doing that, which is nice to see a return of. Anyway, I'll be back in just a moment, so yeah, just sort out what you need to sort out, and I'll be back in just a moment. It's working on both channels?
I typed it.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, sorry. No, it's fine. It's alright, we're all just in the testing stage. Thank you for that. That saves me getting extremely meta and listening to myself whilst I'm also talking to myself, I guess. Alright, we're going to take the begin graphic down. Yeah, it is going to begin shortly, but this is what I like about this whole different setup. Is I'm using OBS, we're using Restream, which is great because it gets it out to multiple sources. I did like doing it through Facebook because it gets it out to people that engage with me and the show on Facebook, which is great. I don't want to leave those good folks behind, but it was causing some problems, and I wanted to sort of branch out and look at other options. So this seems to be working pretty good. I like the restream. I like the fact that you can kind of branch off to separate places at any given time. And I do like OBS because it is more visually interesting. I can throw stuff up as we kind of get a little bit more involved. I can kind of make this a little bit more technical, I guess, or at least visually interesting. And it's not just me using a phone talking consistently. At some point, maybe even able to throw some video clips or audio sources in, all in good time, once I kind of manage to get a hang of how exactly OBS works in all its different faculties, because there's a lot going on, but it's good. I like it. I like the fact that you can do different overlays, you can have prompts, and you can also bring up, as I say, visual references to stuff and media references. But yeah, that is all for a later date. Alright, so I'm just going to get a few more things set up. I'm going to turn the mic off for just a moment. I'm going to put back on my fancy little graphic, and we'll be back ready to start in about 5 minutes. So if you haven't made yourself a cup of tea or what have you, you need to go do something real quick. About 5 minutes time we'll start properly. Right on cue, there is the cat sound. That means we're starting. I couldn't have actually timed that any better, to be honest. I am going to have to actually mute my computer because I can hear myself, so that's not a good start. But yeah, I like that. Maybe we should just record the cat sound, and that should be the official beginning to these going forward. Thanks, Kiki. So yeah, here we go. This is it. The new and improved, vaguely, somewhat more professional. Well, no, let me just rephrase that. Much more professional than previous attempts at a live stream. Beforehand, I was simply live streaming through my phone to Facebook, which was fine and dandy, and that's good that we have the tech to do that. But yeah, it could have always been a lot better, as was proven by the last two attempts. And I use attempt definitively for the last one, because the last time I tried to live stream, it just went like the bottom fell out of it. But here we are. My name, for those of you who are maybe joining in for the first time, is Mel Foster, and as you can see by the, I don't know which way to go, there you go, the crudely etched drawing of the face down there, which kind of looks a little bit like me. Not so much now, a bit of time has passed since I drew that, but I do a show called Dimed Out. It's a podcast, and it's very good, you know, in my opinion. But then again, of course, I'm going to say that. Basically, what the show is about is everything and anything. You know, it started off, for those of you who are joining for the first time that have no idea of what the show is, it started off as somewhat of a journal during the sort of mushroom cloud of the COVID outbreak, and also as an excuse for me to dig into all sorts of different things that I'm interested in and that I have no idea about. Also, I don't know why I'm still wearing headphones, because I don't actually need to hear myself, so those can go. So yeah, it's kind of a mix of the two, and in the last number of episodes, certainly the last 10, has been very guest orientated. People that I know extremely well, people that I don't know that well, and you are going to hear cat, but that's fine. It's all part and parcel of doing the live stream, I guess. Yeah, so it's been kind of guest orientated, but sometimes, as is the case with this week's episode, which if you haven't checked out yet already, you should definitely. Episode 16, it's a sort of independent research episode about a specific point in time or a specific element of something, and that particular element this week is all about Inge Ginsberg, who is a remarkable woman who is 98 years old now, still going strong, still feeling, I presume, just as young as she ever did. And that's one of the appeals about Inge, apart from her amazing life story, which I go into a bit more detail on the actual episode this week. Yeah, 98 years old, and she still has such a youthful soul and spirit, and just a great approach to life, and a very cavalier approach to life, which is very admirable and intriguing. But her life story is fantastic and just truly remarkable. To kind of give you some cliff notes and some sort of pointers, if you haven't listened to the episode, she was a Holocaust survivor and found refuge in Switzerland. She, getting there in its own is a story that you need to sort of really plough into. Holocaust survivor, found refuge in Switzerland, became a songwriter in Hollywood, eventually in the 50s, and then in her 90s kind of had a resurgence in her music career, chasing a Eurovision dream, and found herself fronting a metal band. Yeah, those are the sort of pillar points, the core sort of positions, I guess, the core ingredients to her remarkable life. But it's definitely worth listening to, not just because I'm promoting it, but because it's just such a fascinating story, and she is just, again, a remarkable woman. Yeah, genuinely great stuff. So that's what this week's episode is about. I'm not really going to latch on to anything based on this week's episode. If you're new to the live streams, when we've done them, it's usually been the prospect of taking something that's come up in conversation or is attached to the episode in some way and kind of expanding upon it. But really, there's not much else to say that isn't in the show already, and I don't want to kind of give too much away about the content. If you're new to Inge's story, I don't want to just basically retell it here. I think you kind of need to take a little bit more time and sit with it and look into it. There's a great documentary as well, if you're interested. If you have heard the show and you want to know more about Inge, there's a great short documentary that I talk about in the podcast called Death Metal Grandma, directed by a woman called Leah Gallant. And as I say, it's about 12 minutes, so it's a short doc, but it's really good. It's really insightful into like Inge's personality, not so much her history, but like her personality. And that's one of the things that attracted me to actually do a full episode on Inge. But yeah, that is in this week's it's in this week's episode. It is this week's episode. So yeah. And by the way, I am using OBS, which is why I've got all this visual flair going on, and I'm still kind of getting used to where exactly I put all the little buttons and doohickeys for that sort of stuff. But yeah, definitely check it out. It is a fascinating story for sure. But we're not going to be talking about Inge today. We're kind of going to be doing a little bit of catch up with the stream this week. I did, as I say, try last week, I think it was, or maybe the week before, and we just, like, the bottom fell out of it. So many tech issues just plagued it to the point where I just got frustrated and scrapped it. And what I wanted to talk about in the last one is what we're going to be talking about a little bit today, and that is Murderabilia. Because a couple of episodes ago, when I had Andy on talking about true crime and Ed Gein and Heaven's Gate, kind of got me in the sort of frame of mind into diving deeper into why it is people love true crime and just how much people love true crime. And there is a thing called Murderabilia, and the connection that I'm making between the episode with Andy is not just a straightforward true crime to true crime thing, but when we were talking about Ed Gein, we did actually pose the question, whatever happened to all the artifacts inside of Ed Gein's house? All the sort of lampshades, all the weird shit that he made inside of his house from human remains, what happened? And that kind of led me into this, Murderabilia. Now, what I'm going to do is, because I haven't really had time to tinker about with the browser image thing, because I think you can actually show what I'm looking at through OBS, which at some point we'll definitely be taking advantage of. In the meantime, if you want to check out the visuals for this, then you want to go to the website dimed-out.com. What I'll do is I will throw up a link, and I'll also maybe just take some of the images and make a carousel so you can kind of scroll through them yourself. But yeah, I'm looking, or even if you want to just kind of jump on another tab maybe, and we can do this together in tandem. I'm looking at an article called The 11 Weirdest Serial Killer Murderabilia Items in the World, and it is from a website called serialkillershop.com, of course. So I just kind of thought I would go through it. Now, I don't fully understand what Murderabilia is. I think it's pretty much just exactly what it sounds like. It's artifacts or items that were owned or have a connection to famous serial killers and perpetrators of violent crime. When I was traveling through the US, particularly the West Coast, I went to the Museum of Death in Los Angeles, which kind of comes up in the episode with Andy that I'm talking about in Sense of True Crime. And that place is just full of things that would be considered murderabilia. So letters written by serial killers and convicted criminals, things that were owned by them. And yeah, there's definitely a macabre quality to it, but I think, you know, it also offers a sense of insight as well, for sure. So we're going to kind of go through some of those. I'm also, by the way, trying to figure out where like the chat sections are as well. Oh, I've got a comment here. Yeah, it's a good thing. So I'm checking it. This is the problem with doing it via Restream, I guess, is having numerous chat boxes. Denmark Bad, can you check out Chloe Lost Girl by Don Lochley? I think, or Lowy. It's a really good crime story. Okay, there you go. If you're into true crime, or just crime fiction, I guess, that's a recommendation from Denmark Bad over on Twitch. Chloe Lost Girl by Don I don't know that book. I don't know the author, but I will definitely have a little look into that for sure. Anyway, into the Murderabilia section. Right. Let's have a quick look. Okay, again, yeah, I'm going to put in a link. In fact, if you are on Twitch, I'm going to put in a link there. That would probably be the easier way to do it, and it will give me just a moment. And let me find out where we're at with the Facebook Live thing. And again, this is not a definite need to, but if you want to, you can follow along and see what I'm seeing. Again, once I kind of get a little bit more into how OBS works, I'll definitely be able to sort of go through browser sharing. So here's a list anyway, and I'm kind of just going to run through it. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is serial killer shops 11. What did they say? It was 11 weirdest serial killer murderabilia. Because people do seem to want to collect stuff like this. People do have a genuinely healthy interest in true crime, but then it also kind of tips over into areas which may be not too healthy. People becoming somewhat too attached to cases, too attached to the perpetrators of said cases, and collecting things and forming personal attachments. I mean, we've all heard the stories of people who become engaged and then married to death row inmates, to serial killers, and yeah, that's an aspect that I can't wrap my head around. That is a part of what we referred to in the episode of Andy, the David Blaine effect, of I just can't tap into that mindset. And I guess maybe if you are, and I'm not throwing shade here, but maybe if you are like a very steeled and hardened murderabilia collector, that might also fall into that category as well. Anyway, so here we go. 11 pieces of murderabilia, and again, I'll throw up a link for you to go check out at your own perusal. If you want to do it now or you want to do it later, you can do so. So number 1 is Peter Curtin's head. When it comes to the weirdest memorabilia items, why stop at materialistic objects? Why not go the whole hog and display a serial killer's actual human remains? That is absolutely mad and bizarre. So Peter Curtin, affectionately known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf, responsible for the murder of at least 9 women and young girls in the 1900s. He acquired his nickname due to the fact he drank the blood of some of his victims. It was fueled by a series of unquenchable perversions, many of which included mutilation, blood and fire. Of course, why not? Why is his head there, though? And where is it displayed? Oh, hold on, there you go. In the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Wisconsin Dells. Don't know where that is, but that's where you can find it. Yeah. Obviously preserved. What is left of it is preserved. That is bizarre. That is extremely, extremely bizarre. Peter Curtin's head in the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum of Wisconsin Dells. Wow. Alright, on to item number 2. Jeffrey Dahmer victim doll. Of course, Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the big hitters in the pantheon of serial killers. This is a victim doll, which according to the interesting packaging is fully dismemberable and 100% cannibal approved. Now, I'm confused here. Is this actually for sale? Who is selling this? Surely nobody is selling this now. At this point. It was on sale for $295. That's a lot. That's a lot for a toy of any description. Yeah, crazy. Alright, what else we got? Angel resin does his fingernails. That's totally butchered. Have you ever bitten your fingernail? Yeah, okay, I'm not going to read the full article. But, yeah, in fact, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can do that yourself, I guess, because who wants to just watch someone read an article? But yeah, Murderabilia, interesting sort of side tangent to true crime, I guess. You know, it asks the question, where do you draw the line in your interest in such a... It's not a polarising interest because so many people like it, but I suppose there's a moral and there's an ethical aspect to it. You know, I never like asking people who's your favourite serial killer, because ultimately they've left a trail of victims. So I tend to kind of focus on which cases interested you more. So yeah, Murderabilia, interesting thing, but it does pose a question of why. I think more than anything, to just kind of skim through it. So we've got fingernails, we've got earwax. I see. This is getting into strange territories when you're actually collecting elements or aspects of another human being, regardless of what they've done or why they are infamous. If you are collecting aspects of a human being's biology and preserving it and keeping it as a sort of trophy or a memento, I have to ask why in general, especially when it comes. I suppose there's the intrigue factor when it is somebody of a sort of infamous reputation, like a serial killer. You know, if you really are that involved or that intrigued or moved or fascinated in a certain case, then maybe, but that really would only be for something like a letter, for example, or a journal, a diary entry, or a diary as a whole. Yes, I can totally understand why somebody would want to have one of those. You know, it's a real sense of rarity. It's the personal expressions of somebody that's done something you just can't comprehend. But I cannot comprehend why on earth you would want fingernails or like cylinders of earwax. To me, that's, yeah, I don't understand that whatsoever. What else we got here? John Wayne Gacy's death painting. Yeah, so this is interesting. For those of you who don't know about John Wayne Gacy, you know, outside of being a repugnant, horrible human being, he was obviously he was known as the occasional clown entertainer for children's parties, but he was also known for his paintings, you know, and some of them are just, without too much of a surprise, kind of just disturbing. You know, I think he actually got into a legal battle with Disney because some of his prison paintings involved the Seven Dwarfs. If I remember rightly, he was using Disney licensed characters like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But yeah, he was quite the keen painter, and you know, it's makes you wonder, right? Because Charles Manson was quite into writing music. Although, you know, obviously Charles Manson didn't actually kill anyone himself, but he was responsible for all kinds of awful atrocities and the corrosion of many minds. So he was into making music. Gacy liked to dabble with canvas and paint. Hitler was Hitler a musician? He was he was a failed artist as well. That's right. I knew it was some kind of artistic expression that Hitler had. Yeah. So it makes you wonder, you know, if there is some sort of intrinsic link between art and like extreme behaviour, I guess we'll say. Because I don't want to just lazily draw like a comparison between failed artists and murderers. Because if that was the case, then there would be a lot more murderers than there probably are statistically. But yeah, Gacy's paintings are interesting. And in fact, here the one I'm looking at actually has the Seven Dwarfs on it. More to the point, it showcases Pogo the Clown, which was his entertaining alter ego, in a casket surrounded by the Seven Dwarfs, painted only weeks before Gacy's execution. See, as macabre as that is kind of a cool thing that I can understand why people would want to own that, because of, you know, I guess the relevance of when it was painted in his life, being that close to his actual execution. I don't know if it actually sold, but I'm seeing here that it was put up for sale for a total of $49,000, which then begs the question, if you do have your heart set on a prime piece of murderabilia, like the Gacy Pogo Dwarf picture, how much would you actually be willing to pay for it? Because, you know, as interesting as it would be to own that, 49,000 is a little bit steep for me. What else we got? Heaven's Gate bunk beds. Yeah, I mean, technically not serial killer related, but yeah, we discussed obviously at length in the episode of Andy about Heaven's Gate, and we talked about how Nike stopped making that specific shoe. I guess those would probably go for a pretty hefty price as well, whatever like versions are still left out there. But the bunk beds, see, that is crossing into a different territory. Would you actually want that in your house? That is a little bit too eerie and chilling for me, knowing what happened in that bed and that it was a part of numerous replicated incidents. Yeah, not for me. Yeah, in fact, just in general, like, Murderabilia is not for me. I understand the appeal for sure, especially if you are into true crime, if you are into macabre and slightly spooky paranormal stuff, even, you know, stuff from an alternative sort of viewpoint, I guess, would be a way of putting it. But yeah, not for me, especially at $49,000 for that Gacy painting. But yeah, it'd be interesting to meet somebody that has actually got an original artwork from a convicted killer of note, I guess. But I don't know if I would actually want one myself. You know, as much of an interesting conversation starter it would be, yeah, it's not something I kind of want hanging up in my living room anytime soon. So there you go. I'm going to, as I say, put a link to that article on the website, dimed-out.com, which you can see other side. Now, I will get used to this. I will get used to the mirrored sides, but as you can see in the other corner, that is the website where you can find the link and have a look at those things yourself in a little bit more detail. But that's probably going to be the better way. As I said, I don't exactly want to just sit here with you guys and read through an entire article. Who wants that? What I do want to talk about is David Blaine, because in the episode with Andy, and as mentioned a little bit earlier, I did talk about the David Blaine effect. To really understand that, you need to listen to the episode. And again, that's not cheap promotion, it's just me saving a bit of time. But it's the idea of extreme behaviour, of a mind which is operating in a different way, on a different level, and coming up with different conclusions that I just couldn't myself come to or arrive at in any way at all. So yeah, that's where the David Blaine effect is. But yeah, he's back, or he was back, and it was weird because at the time Ascension hadn't been mentioned, certainly not publicly. It hadn't been advertised, the trailer hadn't been out when we recorded that episode with Andy, but shortly after it popped up, and I was like, well, that's interesting, an interesting coincidence. And it was an interesting event, to say the least. I don't know if you watched it. If you haven't, you should definitely try and find some highlights from it, because it is very gripping viewing. He did a whole pre-show beforehand where he talked about the science, then they ran a bunch of videos and vignettes talking about the prep work that had been into it for the last couple of years, the science, all the sort of legal stuff that he had to do, the sort of license that he had to get to operate a vehicle, because that's what it was considered. It was considered like a high altitude vehicle, I think, or high altitude even. Yeah, so like the research, the background of it was fascinating, and then obviously the event itself was genuinely quite captivating. You know, absolutely mad, and something I could not fathom why you would want to. Well, I say that, yeah, I kind of can. I mean, the thrill of it, the idea of achievement, of accomplishment, of doing something so bold and so daring and so just out there, it has got to be overwhelming to a degree. But just the idea of actually throwing yourself into that and dedicating yourself. One thing that really cemented for me watching David Blaine's Ascension was the level of dedication that man has, the level of determination, is put in towards an idea which is absolutely crackers, but you can't knock the man's hustle, and he kind of has to be applauded for that. So yeah, I generally really enjoyed it from just an interesting standpoint of looking at what is required to even make something like that happen in the first place, and then just seeing it happen, you know, just crazy, and at times breathtaking, you know, no pun intended, watching his breathing technique, watching the fact that he didn't put a parachute on until he reached 8,000 feet, and then what did he get to? Was it like 28,000 feet before he dropped down? Crazy, you know, and to see him land so smoothly. I'm glad he landed so smoothly. I'm glad that everything went well. But just, yeah, something truly quite unique and remarkable and baffling all at once. But definitely worth checking out. If you haven't seen it and you can find highlights or you can find a video replay, I would definitely recommend you give it a watch for sure. Yeah, David Blaine. I wonder if this is him kind of not so much back, but I wonder what he's going to do next, because how the hell do you top that? Or do you finish on that? Is that your encore? I think it kind of should be. But I feel like it should be, but knowing what kind of person he is, I can't imagine he's going to be satisfied with just walking away, which is kind of terrifying, because if he's not going to walk away after doing that, what is it going to take? Anyway, definitely recommend. And something else that I would definitely recommend, and we're going to kind of wrap things up pretty shortly, but I can't not do this and not talk about the new Charlie Kaufman film, which is completely, we have been all over the map with this. Murderabilia, David Blaine, and now Charlie Kaufman. I've been a big Kaufman fan for years, and I really was looking forward to seeing what he'd done with this film. I really liked Anomalisa. I know a lot of people didn't care for it, and some people really did like it, but I know that there was quite a few people on the other side of the seesaw when it came to Anomalisa. And understandably so, because Kaufman's work has always divided people. It's always kind of split people's opinions. You either kind of really find yourself in tune with his general aura and essence of his writing, or you just look at it like it's a bunch of pretentious tosh, and it's there for the sake of being there in some instances. And I do kind of understand why people may take that leaning, but I've always liked Kaufman's work. I've always liked his ideas of identity, and this is definitely in there with some of his best work. It's not my favourite. That's still for sure Eternal Sunshine, which I recently rewatched along with Being John Malkovich. But yeah, I'm thinking of ending things. I feel like this needs an entire live stream episode of its own, because there's so much to unpack. There is so much mirrored and repeated, and there's so much open-endedness to it, but at the same time I feel like it's contained enough to kind of give you a solid idea of what is being projected and from whose perspective. I have theories, I have ideas, but I like the fact that it's not concrete. I've always loved that sort of way of storytelling. A more open-ended, sort of ambiguous air to narrative is always something that's going to appeal to me, because, you know, anybody can read a simple story from start to finish with a definitive conclusion, and sometimes that's what we want, absolutely. Sometimes that's what we need, depending on the mood, depending on our personal circumstances and situation. Sometimes that is the only thing that is, you know, acceptable. But I've always loved the idea of sort of an air of ambiguity in narrative storytelling, and he's great at that, and he really has kind of fine-tuned it to this. I know it's based off a novel, of which I am completely unfamiliar with, but I am kind of intrigued to go and add that to my ever-stretching list of books that one day I may actually read. But yeah, I like the film a lot. I liked it a lot. I thought it has a lot in there. It says a lot about the human condition. It says a lot about identity, and what it is that we are trying to constantly figure out, you know, who we are, what we're doing, what our purpose is. All big universal themes, but he manages to condense it down into it is kind of confusing at times. It is kind of puzzling, it is kind of confusing, but as you go through the maze, you begin to sort of see the layout a lot more clearer, at least from I guess your own interpretation. You know, I know some people hate that sort of thing. I know some people really hate films that would be considered like a Rorschach test, but I love it. I feel like any good art should allow you to input yourself into it and be a number of things, you know, a tool to sort of excavate themes, but also a mirror to kind of reflect where you are, who you are, what you're doing in general, and just work in a more versatile way. And I think this film really does that. But yeah, definitely would recommend. It's it's pretty heavy and it's pretty dense and it is pretty dark at times, and there are some things that are implied which are particularly dark, but overall two thumbs up for sure. So yeah, if you've seen it, let me know what you think. Where would you rank it in amongst the rest of Kaufman's work? Are you even a fan of Charlie Kaufman? If you are, do you prefer him strictly writing and not directing? I think he's actually done... It's been a while since I've seen Synecdoche, New York. So I don't really have much to remember my sort of reference of his directorial work to compare this with. But I think he did a really good job with this. You know, he has got a good knack for image as well as sort of character and narrative building. So yeah, I enjoyed it from both a writing and a sort of directorial perspective. But yeah, if you're a fan of Kaufman, where would you put this? Top 5? Favorite? Or maybe you just didn't care for it. I don't know. Let me know. Anyway, that's going to be it for this week. Kind of gone over a little bit longer than I expected, but yeah, I'm glad we've kind of got this up and running and operational, and I'm going to try and stick to this time of 1 o'clock every Sunday. Going to try my best to stick to that and be a little bit more condensed. Next week we'll be a little bit more prepared because I've got all the testing done, and maybe next week we'll kind of integrate some more stuff like the browser viewer and what have you. But I've enjoyed this. I think it's good. It's like the idea of being versatile with the restream, getting it out to different places, and being able to show you guys stuff through the OBS. As I said at the top of the show, episode 16 is available now, all about Inge Ginsberg. So if you haven't listened to it yet, go check it out. It is a fantastic life story from a remarkable woman. And yeah, if you enjoy it, subscribe, of course, and tell your friends. Next week, we are going to be back to guests. We're going to have, for the very first time, a married couple on the podcast. Pamela and Armando Armale. The Armales are going to be joining me for one of 2 conversations. And the first one is going to be about living COVID-free on the Isle of Man, which is very fascinating, and it's a position that so many of us are just desperate to get to. So it's good to kind of get a little bit of insight from them to see what measures were taken to even get to that stage in the first place, and what a quote-unquote normal life is like. Again, because I think so many of us have forgotten what that was like at this point. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting high point of next week's episode. But we're also talking about Bigfoot, because why not? And we're also kind of throwing out a sort of time travel based hypothetical without saying too much, just to kind of dangle that potential carrot in front of you. So yeah, you've got that to look forward to next week on the podcast. What we'll be doing on next week's live stream, I don't know. I haven't got that far ahead yet. But I've enjoyed this, and this has gone pretty smoothly. No technical hitches, and it's, yeah, big improvement. I'm liking this. So yeah, anyway, I will see you guys next week for the next live stream, but in the meantime, go check out the show for this week if you haven't, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. As always, look after yourself, look after each other, and until next time, keep it dimed out.